Well, how's it going, Devontae? It's been a little while, about a month or so.
Yeah, it's been a little while, but we always have a lot of things going on in our lives and in our businesses. So I'm super happy to be back with you just to talk some real estate, some mortgages, all the fun things in the world.
Absolutely. So for you folks out there, we do this once a month to give you guys some perspective on what the market's like, what's going on different topics. Today, they're kind of interesting topics that a lot of people talk about. We're also going to go over what the rates are doing right now, right, Devontae?
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, you know what? Nobody wants to talk about rates ever. It's not, I don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean? Rates? What rates?
No, that's not true. That's not true at all. You know that. So,
I
all
know,
right.
I
Well,
know it.
let's dive into it really quick here then. So, a question that comes up a lot in my world, and I'm sure it comes up for you a lot, is I
Yeah.
have bad credit. What do I do? So let's just start with that. So if somebody comes to you and they say, "Hey, I've got bad credit. What can I do?" What's your first response?
That is a great question. And I think this is all relative, all right? Because I have conversations with some people and they think that if their credit score isn't 700, they have a better credit score. And then sometimes I have clients in another ballpark that have maybe a lower credit score, maybe in lower 600, and they think their credit's fine, right? So it's just all relative in understanding what the person's looking to accomplish. Obviously, in our world, they're looking to buy a property, but people have to understand the scale of credit scores. Credit scores go down all the way to 350, all the way up to 850. Okay, so it's a wide range. But the average credit score in the U.S. is 700. All right. So how this really always drills down to people is that, okay, what is that minimum credit score you need to get financing for a mortgage? Well, it just depends on what loan product you're going to do. Is it conventional, FHA, or VA? But typically, in order for you to get financing, you want a credit score of at least 580. Okay. You'll see some things out there on the internet that you can go down to 500 to get financing, but there are a lot of different stipulations that go into that, like a 10% down payment and other limitations to it. All right. So kind of 580 is that magic number generally to get financing. So when somebody comes to me to say, "Hey, I have bad credit," then I just ask them a question like, "Well, what's your credit score? How are you tracking it? Where are you seeing this information to make sure we're talking apples to apples?" It's great right now in this world because you can get your credit score from almost anywhere, right? You have Credit Karma, you have Credit Sesame. Now you check your credit card statement, you have a credit score on there too. So you get credit scores thrown at you all the time. Alex, please answer this question for me though. All those credit scores that you can see, which one's right?
Nobody really knows. They're all different.
Exactly. They're all different, right? And that's the key thing about it. What I tell people that you want to think about your credit score as a living, breathing thing, right? It's a snapshot in time. It's always going up, it's going down because different data always reports a payment that you've made reported, or you pay down a bank balance or something increased on a credit card. Things are always going, and there's different calculations or different algorithms that each credit bureau uses, right? So there's a lot of information that goes into it, but generally you'll have a good range. Like if you see your credit score, there's three different credit bureaus. That's super important to understand. There's Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. They all put different pros and cons on your credit score as far as the calculations of things, right? So those credit scores are never going to be the same, but typically they can be in the same ballpark, right? So the number one question, somebody comes up to me or has a conversation like, "Oh, I have bad credit. What can I do to buy a house?" Just have the conversation like, "What do you think your credit score is? How are you tracking it?" And then once I understand where their credit score is at, then we can start diving into how do we get them on the path of getting into a home. All right. I like to compare it like you're going to the doctor. When you go to the doctor, you don't call them and say, "Hey, I feel horrible. You know what? I think I have the flu. I just want you to give me some medicine. I don't want to come into the office." Well, the doctor's going to say, "Well, no, I want you to come into the office. I'm just not going to prescribe you medicine because I want to make sure I'm doing an evaluation on you and I'm actually prescribing you the right medicine so there's not a bigger symptom that we're not aware of or a bigger issue." Same thing on my end of it too. We want to get a copy of that credit report and dive into what's going on in that credit report. Is it collections? Is it a past bankruptcy? We need to understand what that symptom is so we can get that medicine in order for the person to maybe get their credit score up, or maybe they're fine right now and they just don't know it. as consumers and as people, what we tend to do, we tend to put things in our mind like, oh no, I'm not going to qualify for it. I just don't want to apply. Or on the other spectrum of it, I don't want to apply just because I'm scared. I don't want to get maybe told bad news, right? We're scared of those things, but as consumers, you always want to lead to professional advice just because you don't want to get into your own head about it. It's just like, I'm not going to tell a dentist how to do a cavity. I don't want people to think that they can't get financed because they think they have a lower credit score, right? It's just all about coming together with that game plan in order to prescribe them what the best medicine is for them and to make sure that we create that path and that plan. What's that conversation look like for you when somebody says, hey, I have bad credit, or what do you do in your situation?
So usually when this question comes up for me, it's usually like, hey, I'm interested in buying a house, but I can't because of my bad credit. And my response is, have you talked to anybody about it? And specifically lender like yourself, because like you said, it's like going to the doctor and, telling them you're sick. Well, how sick are you? What's the cure? Even if you can't help them, you can help them figure out what they need to do to raise that credit score. So yeah, I think it is not as black and white as people make it out to be, because there are different things that you can do and different things you can do to help yourself out too. And I think people live in this world of yes or no versus there's a range of what you can do. So usually when I do that, have that conversation, I say, hey, here's Devontae's number, give him a call, go talk to him. He'll help you out and figure out what actually makes sense. Can you afford a home? A lot of times, recently I sent you somebody that he thought his credit score is a lot lower. He came back with a pre-approval much higher than he ever expected, but he thought his credit score wasn't as good. So he was very pleasantly surprised when he did talk to you, what he actually could afford.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the magic of this entire thing. Sometimes people have, they think, again, something's wrong with them and everything's really fine, right? And that's why you say, always talk to a professional. Don't make those assumptions about things that you may or may not know. Just get the definitive answer. And I would say this, unfortunately in our industry, everybody's not like us, right? We will have a conversation with a client. We'll give them the advice. Sometimes people in our industry are like, oh, you say you have bad credit. I don't even want to talk to you. I'm not going to help you out. That's an unfortunate part of it too. And that's where sometimes people can get rubbed the wrong way, or maybe they just put things off on the sideline. So again, yes, you want to talk to a person, but you want to try to talk to the right person to get the right advice in order to make sure you get on that path. Another thing that you brought up too that kind of just triggered in my mind when you were talking is that people doing things that they think that maybe harm them or they're just going to help them. A number one thing that that happens on my end of it is that a lot of people think like, oh, I have a collection of my credit report. I'm just going to pay that off. My credit score is going to go up. Yeah, that's logical. But that's the number one mistake that I see on my end of it, is that people are doing things on their credit report thinking that they're improving it, but they're not, but they don't have that professional advice. Again, so to get that clarified, when you pay a collection on your credit report, it actually makes your credit score go down. The reason why, it makes it look like it's a new collection on your credit report, all right? The only time that you ever want to pay a collection is if you call into a collection company and say, hey, I'm willing to pay this collection, but I want you to delete it from my credit report. If they don't agree to delete it from your credit report, don't pay it, okay? It's something called a pay for delete. Now, with that being said, if you pay it and they just mark it as zero balance, hey, that looks good to you, but as far as your credit score, it's going to go down. So never pay a collection unless they're going to delete it. That's a big common misconception, is that I talk to people sometimes like, oh, I'm just going to work on a few things and I'll get back to them. Like, well, I have all the tools. I have all the information. I've seen thousands of credit reports. I can make this much easier for you than you trying to figure it out yourself on something that you don't have a background on. So make it easier for yourself. Again, just into that professional conversation, that professional guidance, so we can get to the other side. But that's the number one mistake that I see on my end of it, is that people are doing things, especially paying off collections, thinking that it's going to help them, but it really harms them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And as you were talking, another thing popped into my head, and I think it's another fear around credit scores is I don't want to go talk to a lender because he's going to pull my credit and that's going to drop my credit score. Talk about that. There is a time period in there where it won't affect your credit score, correct?
Yeah, that's the biggest misconception that I have out there that people have about their credit score. They think if they pull their credit, their score is going to go down like 30 or 40 points. All right. So where this gets really confusing, it's the type of credit inquiries that you're doing in your credit activity. Okay. So what I mean by that is that when you apply for a mortgage, it has a special identifier on your credit report. And because the government stepped in a few years ago and they said, hey, you can't pull somebody's credit score down if they're trying to see if they qualify for a mortgage. That's counterintuitive. That doesn't make any sense. But there's a lot of articles that people write out there that don't know anything about credit, but they freak people out thinking that all these credit inquiries or credit inquiries are going to hurt no matter what. So how I like to describe this for people is that you want to have access to something, but you don't want to need something or look needy. Okay. So if you apply for 6 credit cards in a 30-day period, that's going to pull down your credit score because it looks like you're actively shopping for credit and you really need some type of unsecured debt. That makes you look risky to the credit bureaus in lending because like, hey, what's going on that you have to apply for all this unsecured debt in a short period of time? Is something okay with your financials? So again, you want to do things in moderation. Then on the other end of that too, I have clients that have 820 credit scores. Like, I don't want my credit pool because I don't want to go down to 815. Your credit score is still super high, right? And so that's the thing that's the common conversation for a lot of people. And obviously, I want everybody to have the highest credit score possible, but you have to make it make sense to you that, hey, you applying for something isn't necessarily bad. It's just the frequency you're applying for things and what you're applying for. So to answer your question, that time frame. So in the mortgage industry, there's a 45-day window. All right. Sometimes I see something on a website all the time that says, hey, you pull it, and then another lender can pull it within 14 days, and that's it. So that's not right. It's actually 45 days. So if you apply for a mortgage, you have another 45-day window to apply for a mortgage with another lender, and it won't impact your credit score. So you will see multiple inquiries on your credit report. But as far as the algorithm and calculation that goes into your credit report, it only counts as one hard inquiry. And again, since it's for a mortgage, it doesn't do anything to your credit score. But ultimately, where this gets really confusing for people is what I referenced earlier, is that you get all these free credit scores from everywhere, and it's very confusing. They're all different. So what happens is that if I look at my credit card statement and it says my credit score is 780, and then, oh, Devontae, you pulled my credit score. Now it says it's 740. Oh, you pulled my credit score, went down 40 points. That's not true, okay? It's just different information. We look at the FICO scoring method on the lending side. Typically on the consumer side in the free credit reports, we look at something called a Vantage scoring model. So it's completely different, but automatically in people's mind, because they're kind of conditioned for that, oh, my credit was pulled, it went down. It's just different information. That's all that it is. So that's the battle that I have on my end of it up front sometimes, that people get scared about pulling their credit. And again, I don't want your credit score to go down. I'm not going to tell you something. Think about that logically. I'm not going to tell you to do something that's going to harm you or not able to get financing in some form or fashion, right? But definitely people are very concerned about their credit score and want to keep them at the highest level possible.
Yeah, and that totally makes sense. And by the way, guys, 45 days is quite a while. I'm doing this challenge right now. It's called 75 hard. I have to do the same thing every day for 75 days, and I'm only on day 8.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's been forever. So 45 days,
Yeah, for sure.
you can definitely do a lot with that. Absolutely. And something you talked about like somebody going from like, what was it, like 810 to 805 and thinking that's going to be a huge hit. Talk about the credit score in relation to interest rates and what people actually see when they change into those different levels, because it's probably not as big an impact as what most people think, right?
Yeah, that's correct, right? So in my world, as far as how credit scores really work, they go in 20-point increments, essentially. So what a lot of people don't know is that everything that we do on this lending side is pretty regulated, right? It's a very big business, but it's regulated by the government and it's regulated by Wall Street. They have an agreement of something called it's your credit profile, but they call it loan level price adjusters, okay? So as far as how it works on the lending side, the higher your credit score, up to 780 now. So the person that's in a 700 to a 719, they're in one bucket. Then the person that has a 720 to 739 in that path, they're in another bucket. So it's a 20-point increment that it goes into. up into a max of 780. It used to be 740 was the prime credit score before some adjustments were made about 2.5 months ago, as far as that. But with that being said, how does that impact borrowers as far as their interest rate? Is that typically you see a difference once you go under 720 now, okay? So typically the person that has a 720 up to a 780 credit score, their interest rate's probably going to be within an eighth of each other, right? So not a significant difference, but the person that has a credit score that is going to be under 700 or 680, you're going to see a difference of maybe a quarter or more from having the best rate, right? So the higher your credit score, you're going to have access to the best rates, but the lower it goes down in those increments, you're going to see it gap out a little bit, okay? So again, under 700, you're probably going to see from the prime credit score in your difference, a 0.25% change or more in interest rate, meaning that it may be a little bit higher, okay? So it's not as significant as people may think, like it's a 0.5% or 1%. Again, all situations are different, all scenarios are different, so that's why you talk to a professional, but that's typically what it looks like on my end of the spectrum as far as your credit score going up or going down and how it impacts your credit score.
Yeah.
Or your
I
interest
feel
rate,
like,
I mean.
yeah, I feel like the general public thinks if you have a 650 or 7 or whatever, that you're going to jump a whole percentage or 2%. It's not really
Right.
like that. It's going to
That's
be
not true, yeah.
incremental from where it's at. Obviously, you want to get the best credit score,
Absolutely.
the best interest rate that you can, but it's not as significant as a lot of people think, in my opinion. So
Absolutely. You're right.